it's really nice to be back after almost a full month since I last posted. For me, it has been a really busy month with work and with training, as well as all the other extra activities I'm doing on the side. But yeah, I'm really grateful. It has been a really good month. Apart from being busy, it has been really rewarding and fruitful, as well as challenging to admit. As you probably can relate, starting a new job, it's not just um, you're not just experiencing the enthusiasm, but you also experience the apprehension of all the uncertainty that lies ahead and of all the unknowns, so on and so forth. So far, so good. I really, really enjoyed the first month and 2 weeks of my new role. To tell you a bit about my new role, that is working in NHS at the Western General Hospital where I previously worked, but now on a different role, and that is I'm coordinating and managing a therapeutic activities well-being program for the patients at Western General Hospital. And yeah, this is the first time when I am actually having a team to manage, so that's really new for me, but very interesting, very stimulating, and I'm learning a lot, which is very good. In today's video, I want to discuss with you about Module 2 of the Certificate in Counseling Skills. Module 1 so far has been packed with really good information, theory, as well as really good opportunities to learn new skills and apply these skills in triads or in larger groups. Module 2 focuses entirely on the process of counseling. And so far we've explored theory such as attachment, loss, grief, transition, change, and challenge. And we looked at skills that are required by a counselor to have and to know how to apply throughout the counseling process. The counseling process itself is structured or comprises of 3 phases. And these 3 phases are beginnings, middles, and endings. And each stage, each phase of the counseling process has its own focus, if you want. So if I'm to think, the beginnings, the incipient stage of the counseling process, as well as the counseling relationship, has its focus on getting to know the client, getting to understand who they are, getting to know their story, as well as supporting the client to understand the nature of that counseling relationship, the boundaries that counseling relationship will be characterized by, without which a counseling relationship and a therapeutic relationship, it's not safe and it shouldn't be possible. The middle phases of the counseling process focuses on helping the client to focus on specific aspects or issues, if you want, as well as supporting the client to learn to be challenged or challenge themselves in order for growth or for change to happen. And of course, the endings phase focuses on helping the client to move forward from having had for a definite period of time a counseling relationship and the support of a counselor, helping them to come to closure and to learn how to manage on their own. So that would be very briefly the main focus of each of these stages of the counseling process and of the counseling relationship. In today's video, I want to focus and explore a bit about the beginnings. And as I said, boundaries are essential in a therapeutic relationship, and without which a counseling relationship shouldn't exist because it's not safe. The main purpose of boundaries is to keep both the counselor and the client safe. Considerations when I'm thinking about boundaries are around time, around space, around confidentiality, around contract and financial remuneration for the counselor, as well as for the client, to know what to expect in terms of costs, to know what to expect in terms of time commitment, to know what to expect in terms of behavior that they will witness from the counselor and behavior that the counselor um, hopes and expects to witness from the client. So around acceptable behavior and non-acceptable behavior, be that with regards to punctuality or verbal aggression or violence, yeah, and any other aspects when you that you can think of when you think of acceptable behavior and non-acceptable behavior. Um, the nature of the relationship, the counseling relationship should always be singular. And by that, what do I mean? Dual relationships are never allowed. By that, I mean no counselor should ever befriend a client outside of the counseling sessions or outside of that counseling relationship per se. A counselor is not to be someone's friend, or is not to be someone's mother, nor to be someone's teacher, um, or someone's mentor or life coach. A counselor is a counselor, and that counseling relationship must remain a counseling relationship. Because otherwise, should the counselor develop a dual relationship with the client, they will be biased in the way how they can support a client to perceive themselves, to understand themselves, and to thrive or to resolve their difficulties and their challenges. In terms of time, it's really important for the counselor to have the skill at the very beginning of the counseling relationship and the counseling process to support the client to understand the definite time that each counseling session will have. And in general, a counseling session will last between 50 and 60 minutes. I've heard a lot of people saying that they had counseling that would last a 3-hour session, would be like a 3-hour session, and that is incredible, because if you are to be real and if you are to fully focus and listen to your client and fully give your client your full attention, humanly it's not possible for someone to be listening to you and to be focusing fully on you as a client for 3 hours. So yeah, I would be really wary and question myself if I would be in a counseling relationship that each session maybe would last more than 50 minutes or an hour. In terms of space, counseling should only take place in a very well defined space. Should not take place in a cafe. It should be in a place which is confidential, which is quiet, where the client can relax and feel safe in that space, not worrying that they might be heard by someone else or interrupted, as well as for the counselor, because the environment is really important when helping both the client and the counselor to focus on each other and to focus on um, on working with each other and on building that relationship and that trust, as well as feeling safe to. I'm thinking from the client's perspective, feeling safe to be vulnerable should they be prepared to share difficult things. So yeah, a very well defined space. It's really important, and it must be discussed and established from the very beginning with the client. Financial remuneration. It's really important for the counselor to be able to discuss with the client from the very beginning the duration of the sessions, the space in which the sessions will take place, as well as the cost that each counseling session will involve, or the cost of a counseling block of sessions. And also to consider how, if the client doesn't afford the counseling sessions, the price of the counseling session, to consider how can the counselor support the client to access funds or signpost them to a welfare advisor, that could help the client to access those funds in order to access counseling sessions. So yeah, all these aspects are really important to be discussed with the client in the first few sessions. Sometimes it's not possible, depending on each client, it's not possible for the counselor maybe to discuss these aspects in the first session, but it is definitely recommended to discuss these aspects that are enclosed in a contract and to discuss that contract with the client in the second, or third session at the latest. Because had this, having had discussed these aspects, then allows both the client and the counselor to focus on what is really important, which is the client and their story and their process and the support that they need, their journey. In terms of theory that we explored so far in Module 2, this has been around attachment, around change, around loss, around transition, around grief, around challenging. I'm thinking of skills here actually. We've been exploring what skills do the counselors need to have at the beginning of the counseling process. We mentioned about boundaries. Boundaries, it's a really important skills that each counselor must have, and really, really important not only to establish those boundaries, but to maintain them. To maintain them and also to support the client to maintain those boundaries. Because very often clients will be looking at breaking those boundaries, not necessarily intentionally, sometimes maybe intentionally, but most of the times probably unconsciously or unintentionally. So the the counselor's role is to help the client draw these boundaries and help the client to maintain these boundaries in order for both the counselor and the client to be safe, and the working relationship, the helping relationship, or the counseling relationship to be a safe environment, a safe space, a safe relationship. Thinking back about theory, attachment has been a topic that I've explored and I learned about in my psychology studies, so it hasn't necessarily been new to me. The main basis of the attachment theory, which has been developed by Bowlby and has developed in a span of 30 years between 1950 and 1980. What the theory postulates is that each human being is creating at the beginning of their life a very important relationship with a primary caregiver, be that a mother, a father, a member of the family, a neighbor, anyone, another human being that is looking after that baby. And how that relationship is created and how that relationship evolves and what that relationship offers to the child will impact the child throughout their life. And it is really important for each person to experience the very early stage a safe and secure relationship, because that would be the main reference of which and from which that baby will learn to relate to themselves, to perceive themselves and to relate to themselves, as well as to relate and interact with other people. I'm going to look a bit about the types of attachment on my notes. So the types of attachment that Bowlby has developed as well as supported, as I mentioned, this theory has developed between 1950 and 1930. So over a period of 30 years, the theory has been reviewed and redefined and developed further. Mary Ainsworth was a psychologist as well, who has been Bowlby's student, who has contributed massively to the attachment theory. So as I mentioned, the attachment theory states that we all have a need to develop a close emotional relationship with a caregiver. And this relationship protects us when we are dependent, because a baby is really dependent on their parents or on their caregiver. And it develops in the second half of the first year of our life. And we develop a pattern of attachment according to how our attachment behavior is responded to by our caregivers. And this pattern of attachment will influence our later ability to make relationships and cope with separation and loss. And attachment behavior is activated throughout life when we feel a need of protection and help. And how attachment develops. The particular attachment relationship we develop is a result of a two-way communication between an infant and a caregiver. And the child signals when in need of support and the adult responds. Bowlby has developed that there are three types of attachment between an infant and an adult, the caregiver, and that is the secure attachment, an insecure attachment, characterized by anxiety and ambivalence, and an insecure attachment characterized by avoidance. The pattern of attachment we develop as a child will influence our later relationship. If you are new to attachment, I will drop a link in the description of this video where you can learn a bit more about the attachment theory and the influence that the initial attachment we develop with our primary caregiver has over our lives. Mary Ainsworth as well has contributed a lot over the years, so I'll also drop a link about her views on attachment theory. And you would wonder, well, why is attachment so important? You had it, I just said it before. It is considered that the way how we experience our initial attachment will influence the way how we experience ourselves and we relate to others, and we are capable of connecting with others and building relationships throughout our lives. So it is really important for a counselor to be aware of this theory and to be aware of maybe what type of attachment their client has had, has experienced, and how is that impacting their current circumstances and relationship with themselves and with the significant people in their lives. Other theory that we explored was on loss and on change, as well as on transition and grief, and especially when you think of grief, you consider, well, it's very painful for someone to lose a loved one. So of course there will be grieving, there will be suffering. It is considered that loss doesn't only involve losing someone that we love or losing another human being. Loss is also comprised of losing a job, losing an ability, losing a skill, losing losing a friendship, losing a relationship, be that divorce, be that separation. And again, why attachment is so important? Because attachment will, our initial type of attachment will influence the way how we cope with loss, as I previously said, how we cope with loss, how we react when we experience loss, be that losing a loved one because they deceased, or losing a job, or losing an ability, or losing a faculty. When you think of people that suffer of dementia, a capacity to think clearly, or losing an ability to walk because of a surgery, losing a limb, or loss in general implies and it will affect our identity as human beings. So it's really important to have a really wide perspective when we think of loss or when we think of grieving. Losing someone's status as a husband or as a employee, that creates massive sufferance within that human being, and it's really important for us to understand that people can grieve after these aspects as well. because it influences and it impacts their identity, on their identity. Um, so yeah, that's a bit about theory. Another part of theory, it's about change and the the transition process, and what it happens to people when they go through change. What kind of journey do people have emotionally and psychologically speaking? What emotions do people experience when they go through different stages of change? Is change just a full solid process, or it's a process that comes in stages? Um, really, really interesting theory I learned about the changes that the transition curve, um, which has been developed. Just allow me a second to find my notes. Which has been developed by Hobson. Um, I will actually show you a bit the structure and the model. I hope you can see it. Yeah, so if you look at this diagram, it suggests that this is a curve, a transition curve. And at each stage, you can see the little boxes there. At each stage, an individual will experience different emotions. So to mention a few at the start of the transition, maybe an individual will react with numbness, wondering how do you know that how do I know that the transition has started? I don't necessarily feel anything. Um, then they might experience denial, and they might try to minimize the fact that they are going through a change, or that that change is actually happening, be that desired change or undesired or unexpected change. Then an individual might experience something like low mood or depression, because the change they're going through is unwanted and unexpected and painful. Then the transition curve goes further to mention that the next stage that possibly could be for someone to experience is trying to accept the reality of that change and learning to let go when they realize that the change has been inevitable or there's nothing within their control they can do. Then that is followed by a phase of testing, where the person is trying to live reality with that change having taken place, and trying to find new ways of living, new ways of being after that change. Then the next phase would be the person would be in search for meaning, would look at how they can continue living or how they can learn to live differently, how they can find meaning after the change that they've been through in their lives. And the last stage would be internalization or integration. And this refers to the final stage of the transition change, that aims to integrate all that experience, and understand the impact that that experience had over the individual and how that can be incorporated in who they are and in their new reality and new life after the change that they've been through. This is um, a model that has been created by Hobson, Scully, and Stafford, and what I explained to you are a series of emotions through which a person might go internally through while they are transitioning, while they are going through a change. So yeah, it's entitled Changes in the Self-Esteem During Transitions, or Changings in the Self During Transition. I think it's essential for the counselor to understand how people cope with change and what people are experiencing internally when they're going through change. And from that stance to help the client understand themselves and understand what they are going through and understand their own emotions. But that is it is part of the beginning stages of the beginning phase of counseling, because it might be the case that someone comes and seeks counseling when they are actually going through a major change in their life, or a minor change but that has a big impact on their life. So it's really important for the counselor to have knowledge and understanding of the transition curve, of the change um, process, and what the client might experience in terms of emotions throughout this process. And yeah, help the client to understand themselves, as I mentioned. um I'm thinking, is there anything else I wanted to share with you on the incipient stages of the counseling process and the counseling relationship? um skills that are really important for the counselor to know, to have, and to apply at the beginning of the counseling process, um, in this first stage of the counseling relationship. As I said, it's to know how to create and to help the client create, um, and maintain boundaries, in order to provide a safe relationship and a safe space, for the client to open up, to learn to trust and to share, of who they are and why they came to counseling. Um, of course, the indispensable skill of listening, in order to learn who their client is and learn of their stories and get to know the client and get to understand the client's experience from their frame of reference. Um, Empathy, of course, an ability to reflect back on feelings, to help the client gain clarity over their feelings and over their experience, an ability to summarize, to help the client again gain clarity over what they're sharing, um, an ability to hold the client in unconditional positive regard, um, with no judgment, an ability to be genuine, and be authentic in their relationship with the client. So the beginnings of the module 2 looks at actually helping the participants on solidifying the skills, the counseling skills that they've been learning and practicing in module 1, which is then followed by other set of skills at a more advanced level. But this is to be learned by me and to be explored and to be practiced in the second part of the module, which looks at, as I said, at middles and at learning to help the client to focus on specific issues or specific aspects that they want to grow over or to improve in their lives, and on an ability, the counselor, the participant, us that we're training to become a counselor, to learn how to challenge and learn how to support the client to experience a shift in their perspective, or to experience internal as well as external change, be that an emotional change as well as a behavioral change. I think these were the main aspects I wanted to discuss with you in today's video. Just to make a real quick summary of what we looked at in today's video. We looked at the counseling process, which consists of 3 stages or 3 phases. Those are beginnings, middles, and ends. We discussed a little bit about the theory that we looked over at the beginning of this module, which was on attachment, transition, change, loss, grief, and of course on the skills that are required for a counselor to have, especially for the beginnings phase of the counseling relationship and of the counseling process. I hope you find this video and this content that I've shared in this video helpful and interesting. Um, I encourage you to maybe consider for yourself how your initial attachment, what is your type of attachment, and how this type of attachment has evolved over the years for you, and how is this type of attachment impacting your life, the way you perceive yourself and the way you do relationships with others. I want to actually mention something here. It's not all doom and gloom. Most of the population are have not experienced a secure attachment for various reasons, um, and that's not to be said that if you haven't experienced a secure attachment with your primary caregiver, you're all doomed for life. No. Um, Further research into neuroplasticity and the capacity of our brain to change, um, initial brain connections that have formed in that first half of the first year of our life, um, has shown that our brain has the capacity to change those connections and rewire. We have the capacity to rewire our brain, and we have the capacity to transform an insecure attachment, an insecure, disorganized, ambivalent, avoidant attachment into a secure attachment. Of course, that takes a lot of work with self. It takes a lot of self-awareness. There is very much hope, and that is very encouraging. We are not dependent on our initial attachment. We can change that for ourselves. Working with ourselves and being supported by a therapist or a counselor in learning what our attachment is and how our attachment influences our life in the present moment. Be that if you're 30 or 50 or 60, it's never too late to work on your attachment style. So that is very encouraging, isn't it? We looked at theory on change, on transitions, and on loss very, very briefly. The skills that are required by a counselor to have at the initial phase of the counseling process and the counseling relationship, which, as I mentioned, boundaries, capacity to create and maintain boundaries are essential. It's essential, as well as an ability to use the foundation counseling skills in order to get to know their client and understand their story, and build trust to support the client in that relationship, and to help the client to trust the relationship itself and the counselor as an individual, in order to allow themselves to experience change. That has been all for today's video, and I look forward to exploring with you in the next video the middle phase stage of the counseling process, and then we'll be looking in the next video at exploring the endings phase. So that's all. Thank you very much for listening and for being here. Drop me any comment if you have any questions or any comments. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now. Take good care of yourself.